Imagine waking up to the news that one of the most volatile geopolitical standoffs of the century has been solved overnight, without a single shot fired or a single dollar spent. Recently, Donald Trump announced what appeared to be an unprecedented diplomatic triumph. He claimed that Iran had effectively agreed to everything, opening the highly contested Strait of Hormuz, completely abandoning its proxy forces like Hezbollah and Hamas, and even transferring its enriched uranium stockpiles out of the country. To make the deal sound even more flawless, he firmly denied media reports suggesting the United States would unfreeze $20 billion in Iranian assets as a bargaining chip. It was framed as the ultimate political masterstroke, securing total capitulation for absolutely nothing in return. Yet, almost immediately, a jarringly parallel reality emerged from Tehran. Mohammad Bakr Qualibaf, the Speaker of the Iranian parliament, took to social media to completely dismantle this narrative. He stated categorically that the United States president had issued 7 entirely false statements within a single hour. Qualibaf made it abundantly clear that the Strait of Hormuz will not remain open under current blockades, and any vessel passing through must follow designated routes under strict Iranian authorization. He emphasized that ground realities, not social media declarations, dictate the flow of the world's most critical energy choke point. So, how do we reconcile these two entirely contradictory universes? To understand this, we must look past campaign, trail rhetoric, and examine the unforgiving arithmetic of Middle Eastern enforcement. Let us consider the physical logistics of the enriched uranium transfer. Iran currently holds substantial stockpiles of uranium enriched to up to 60% purity, much of it buried deep inside heavily fortified, subterranean facilities like Fordow, which sits beneath mountains of solid rock. Physically extracting this nuclear material is not a matter of a simple diplomatic handshake. It requires either a massive, months-long logistical operation, coordinated by international bodies under a framework of total domestic cooperation, or a catastrophic, full-scale military invasion. A foreign power cannot simply walk in and carry out highly sensitive heavy metals without severe logistical and military preparation. In the theater of global affairs, a sudden diplomatic agreement without a concrete mechanism for ground enforcement is like drawing a magnificent fortress on a piece of parchment and expecting it to hold back a raging flood. It is a beautiful but dangerous illusion. The profound lesson here is that true geopolitical leverage is never measured by the victorious tone of a press conference, but by the harsh physical capacity to enforce those terms on unforgiving ground. Furthermore, to comprehend how two entirely contradictory narratives can emerge simultaneously, one must examine the deeply fractured political anatomy of Tehran. The state apparatus is not a monolithic entity. Rather, it is divided by a profound internal fault line. On one side stands the civilian, diplomatic corps and reformist elements, grappling with a battered domestic economy, where inflation consistently hovers near 50% and the national currency continues to plummet. These diplomats may genuinely see the necessity of yielding to overwhelming external pressure. They are the figures sitting at the negotiation tables, ready to sign sweeping concessions to secure economic survival. However, these diplomats do not control the instruments of hard power. The true center of gravity rests with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This is not merely a military branch, but a colossal parallel state and economic conglomerate. With over 190,000 active personnel, an independent intelligence apparatus, and absolute control over the nation's ballistic missile program, The Guard is the ultimate arbiter of military reality. They command the fast attack naval craft, patrolling the Persian Gulf, and maintain the intricate financial networks, sustaining regional proxy forces. If a civilian negotiating team signs an agreement promising to open maritime choke points or surrender nuclear material, they are essentially writing a check from a bank account they do not own. If the Guard commanders decide that the strait remains closed, the ink on the diplomatic treaty becomes instantly worthless. Attempting to enforce a humiliating, externally mandated capitulation upon such a fiercely proud and deeply entrenched military faction carries catastrophic risks. Geopolitical history provides ample evidence that when civilian factions attempt to bypass powerful military hardliners to secure peace, the result is rarely a smooth transition. In this volatile environment, forcing a sudden treaty could act as a lethal accelerant, triggering severe internal friction, or even a swift military coup. Feeling cornered by both foreign adversaries and perceived domestic betrayal, the military elite might choose aggressive escalation over quiet submission. A sweeping diplomatic treaty signed by a powerless civilian faction is much like a captain frantically turning a disconnected steering wheel. The movements look impressive on the bridge, but the massive engine and the rudder remain firmly controlled by a defiant crew below deck. Ultimately, international agreements negotiated with only half a government are not blueprints for lasting peace, but fragile ceasefires waiting to violently implode. Indeed, beyond the internal fractures that paralyze decision-making, there is a profound external awakening taking place within the Iranian leadership. Recently, President Masoud Pezeshkian made a highly symbolic appearance at the Iranian Red Crescent headquarters to formally accept a shipment of humanitarian aid from Beijing. While expressing the standard diplomatic gratitude, his subsequent remarks carried an extraordinary and highly calibrated subtext. He pointedly noted that the United States ultimately views China as its primary global adversary, placing Iran significantly further down the list of existential threats. His underlying message was unmistakable. Washington is attempting to exhaust and dismantle secondary obstacles before it directly engages the principal challenger in the Indo-Pacific. This seemingly benign observation is, in reality, a coded geopolitical grievance. Pezeshkian is signaling that Tehran is actively absorbing the kinetic and economic blows originally intended for Beijing. Consider the staggering asymmetrical costs. Iran, operating with an estimated annual defense budget of roughly $8 to $10 billion, is taking the full brunt of Western financial exclusion, enduring severe currency devaluation and the forfeiture of over $100 billion in blocked petroleum exports over recent years. In contrast, they observe the primary strategic competitor preserving its immense $300 billion military apparatus and robust global trade networks. By publicly highlighting this dynamic, the Iranian leadership is subtly reminding its international partners that they have stepped onto the front lines, acting as a tactical sponge for American hostility, and suggesting that current levels of assistance are drastically insufficient for the burden they carry. This psychological turning point among secondary powers is entirely consistent with broader historical patterns. We witnessed a striking parallel recently when Russian leadership engaged directly with Western media. It was explicitly suggested that Washington's relentless focus on Eastern Europe was a tragic misallocation of strategic bandwidth, urging Western policymakers to recognize that the true long-term economic rival resided in East Asia. Both Moscow and Tehran, after plunging deep into the suffocating quagmires of attritional warfare and facing unprecedented global isolation, appear to be experiencing the exact same harsh geopolitical epiphany. They are looking across the burning theater of conflict and realizing they have been effectively utilized as strategic buffer states. In the grand architecture of global power competition, secondary nations are slowly recognizing that they have been assigned the role of a sacrificial breakwater, engineered to absorb the violent fury of the storm so that a rising fortress further inland can construct its defensive walls in absolute tranquility. Ultimately, when a frontline proxy fully awakens to the reality that its own survival is being traded for another empire's time, the entire structural integrity of that geopolitical axis begins to fatally unravel. Consequently, the profound realization now washing over these secondary powers signals the structural failure of a much grander geopolitical blueprint. For years, a sophisticated distraction strategy has been quietly unfolding across the globe. The objective was ruthlessly pragmatic: to fund, support, and elevate heavily sanctioned anti-Western states across multiple theaters, from the plains of Eastern Europe to the Persian Gulf, and all the way to the political instability in South America. By igniting these peripheral brushfires, the primary rising power could effectively scatter Washington's military and diplomatic bandwidth, buying invaluable time and silence to prepare for its ultimate strategic objectives in the Indo-Pacific. However, the macroeconomic and political toll of sustaining isolated proxy states is proving to be unsustainable. Consider the immense financial drain required to keep these regimes afloat. Billions of dollars in subsidized energy agreements, clandestine financial clearing networks, and critical technological lifelines have been poured into these buffer zones. Yet, the return on this geopolitical investment is rapidly diminishing. Moscow remains deeply bogged down in a grueling resource. Now, Tehran is buckling under the weight of severe hyperinflation and the sheer exhaustion of financing multiple regional militias. The proxy shields are systematically cracking under the immense pressure of American economic gravity. The strategic consequences of this collapse are profound, as these diversionary flashpoints either stabilize, seek diplomatic off-ramps, or exhaust themselves entirely. The United States is no longer endlessly distracted by Middle Eastern bogs or peripheral skirmishes. Washington is now actively consolidating its alliances, rapidly reallocating hundreds of billions in defense spending and aggressively pivoting its undivided military focus directly toward the Pacific. The primary rising power has successfully alienated the reigning hegemon to a point of irreversible hostility. Yet, the very distraction screen designed to absorb that hostility is rapidly burning away. Deploying proxy states is like throwing a handful of smoke grenades to confuse a heavily armed sentinel. It provides a brief, tactical illusion of safety. But once the smoke inevitably clears, you are left standing completely exposed in the crosshairs of an opponent whose attention is now fiercely and exclusively focused on you. In the ruthless calculus of global hegemony, outsourced conflicts only delay the inevitable, undivided confrontation. And as the smoke clears from these peripheral proxy conflicts, global attention is inevitably pivoting toward the primary strategic theater and the true military capabilities of the rising power. Specifically, its highly publicized maritime expansion. Beijing frequently heralds its naval modernization as the definitive arrival of a genuine blue water navy, showcasing a rapidly expanding fleet currently spearheaded by 3 aircraft carriers. On paper, these massive vessels symbolize the ultimate capacity to project power far beyond coastal defense lines, seemingly designed to challenge the established maritime dominance of Washington across the deep oceans. Yet, a critical examination of naval logistics reveals a profound operational mirage. All 3 of these carriers are conventionally powered, relying heavily on massive diesel turbine engines. During high-tempo combat operations, a conventional carrier of this displacement consumes approximately 400,000 gallons of fossil fuel every single day, because they lack the unlimited endurance of nuclear propulsion. The kind of reactors that power the American Nimitz and Ford-class supercarriers for 25 years without refueling, these conventional fleets must remain permanently tethered to a highly vulnerable umbilical cord of slow-moving replenishment oilers. This inescapable logistical dependency creates a fatal structural flaw in modern maritime warfare. In a high-end kinetic conflict in the open ocean, sophisticated adversaries will not immediately waste munitions attempting to penetrate the dense overlapping air defense networks of the carrier itself. Instead, they will utilize long-range anti-ship missiles to systematically eliminate the thin-skinned, defenseless supply vessels trailing behind the main strike group. Once that logistical lifeline is violently severed, a majestic 60,000-ton warship is mathematically reduced to a floating, immobilized target within a mere 7 days. The fleet may technically boast the displacement to sail into the deep ocean, but without secure, continuous resupply under heavy fire, its combat effectiveness evaporates almost instantly. Deploying a conventional carrier strike group into contested waters without an unbreakable logistical chain is like dispatching a heavily armored knight into the desert who relies entirely on an unarmed, fragile squire to carry his water flask. An adversary only needs to eliminate the squire, and the invincible knight will inevitably collapse from thirst before ever drawing his sword. Ultimately, true blue water supremacy is measured not by how far a fleet can confidently sail in the calm waters of peacetime, but by how long it can independently survive in the unforgiving storm of war. When we step back and survey this global landscape, from the illusion of an overnight diplomatic miracle in Tehran to the harsh logistical realities of conventional maritime fleets, a singular truth emerges. The international order is shifting back to cold, unforgiving realities. True geopolitical power is dictated not by enthusiastic signatures on a piece of paper, but by internal military enforcement, sustainable economic strategies, and unbreakable logistical chains. If you found this independent analysis valuable, please subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and join us as we continue to watch these global currents unfold.